Item number 2, CRA Executive Director. Ms. Johnson, you want to bring everyone up to speed on where we are?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, members of the Commission. Work session item number 2 relates to the CRA Executive Director. Based on the discussion that was had at the last work session, there were a number of items that the Commission asked to see as it relates to the potential recruitment process. So as part of your backup, what we have delineated for your consideration is just sort of a compare and contrast between the in-house position, if we were to go that direction, and the contract executive director position as it stands right now. We have also indicated proposed posting sites for the consideration of the mayor and the commission, as well as the recruitment announcement, and then the various steps that the CRA board would need to take to effectuate the change in the position, the steps that the city attorney would have to take, as well as the city commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, and the commission for discussion and direction.
All right, now, Commissioners, I'm sure you know the context in which we're looking at this item. It has been my suggestion that we remove from the RMA contract the position of the CRA Executive Director. I don't know if you want to, we can certainly tee that up for discussion as whether you think that's advisable or not. If you do think it's advisable, then this is a chance to weigh in on what you would like to see in this position, so that as we, again, assuming that you decide to go this way, if we do, then we need to publish the job description, publish it, solicit applications, and move on with it so that we can hit the ground, so that we could continue the work of the CRA and have a CRA director, executive director, in-house as soon as possible. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Riles.
No, Shove was before me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Shove, Commissioner Shove.
Thank you, Mayor. I think as it pertains to some of our discussions here today, one of the things that I'm most interested in is the reporting relationship of this position. Previously, when we've talked about this position, I've heard support from the neighborhoods of bringing the position in-house. At current, as part of a CRA contract position, we as a CRA board have direct access, direct communication, direct ability to speak on projects, et cetera, with staff. The first point under in-house position is direct accountability to the CRA board or mayor as opposed to a contractor. I think one of the make it or break it points for me there is that as a member of the CRA board, I would want that position to report to the CRA board directly, in that it would have somewhat of a different position than other levels of staff under the mayor, so that commission or CRA board would have direct access to communicate with that position. So I think that's one of the key details that would be important to me in looking at how we move forward with this position. Again, supportive of looking at how it can come into a city in-house position. I think some of the other points you have here, where there's better synergies, better communication, better processes, that one point for me is very important as to how that gets executed.
Okay. Now, Commissioner Rouse.
Yeah, I would concur with Commissioner Shove. That's exactly, she said verbatim what I would have said. You said it better and more eloquently than I did.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Neary.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for this information, Ms. Johnson. I had a chance. I wasn't here this weekend, but I did get in first thing this morning, so I had a chance to review it. The in-house versus contracted position seems to me specific to the director's position. Under the contracted position, and I don't know that I remember reading their contract, but I don't know that I remember the specific part of it. The CRA board can request removal of any contracted employee at the sole discretion, so meaning the board. So if there was that director's position, this board could say, hey, listen, I think we need to move on for whatever reasons. The in-house position, it sounds to me that we're still figuring out what that would look like in terms of those dynamics, right? In terms of, is this, because as I saw the new, I'm going to call it draft, but I don't know, maybe the latest org chart. Thank you very much. It's Monday morning. I appreciate it. The latest org chart, the CRA position is in the mayor's cabinet. And so, again, I guess that's the genesis of this conversation, to really figure out what that looks like. Because to me, at that point, this board really has no discretion on that position in terms of making any decisions about it. It becomes a position that it's in the administration. So shaking your head, no. Okay, so I'm reading that wrong?
No, because I thought that the charter, the bylaws for the CRA were very specific, that the executive director would be subject to the determination, approval authority of the board as a whole, and not just to the chairman. I mean, it's somewhat of a hybrid, because while it's a city employee, meaning that the employee is paid and subject to the HR requirements, et cetera, of the city, it's still a CRA position, and that position is governed by the board. That's the way I interpret it, but if you need a more formal opinion, we could certainly get one. It's certainly not my intent to have the sole say on the hiring or firing of the individual in that position. I see that as a CRA board decision.
And running parallel to that, including the direction in terms of what's considered a priority.
Absolutely, absolutely. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to say that I do concur with my colleagues on the dais. I also think that we should take a look at really the pros and cons of bringing the position in-house. I think it goes to a lot of the questions that we have right now of the dynamic between the executive director and the CRA board, as to whether maybe what the difference would be of keeping it in-house or having it brought in-house versus maintaining it as an outside contractor. The CRA board obviously didn't have any input in the removal or asking for the resignation of the prior CRA director, and he was a contractor. I understand there's some different dynamics that were going on because of that position being under the control of city administration. But I think we just need to take a closer look at that, of the ramifications of bringing it in-house versus keeping it outside. Well,
Actually, you would probably have more input in it if it was brought in-house. The contract is between the city and RMA. And so as a chief executive officer of the city, I can certainly give directive advice to the RMA as the contractor that there needs to be a change in that position, which is what we did. If it was an in-house position, and language would be in making it very clear that that is subject to board approval, blah, 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 then I think you as members of the CRA board would have to weigh in on that. But that's a decision that you have to make. And I just made the recommendation, I think, for a number of reasons, including community accountability. It's best if we have this as an in-house position, a city employee who was the face of the CRA. But that's a recommendation, and you all would have to weigh in on that and have to approve that at an appropriate meeting. And if that's not the direction in which you want to head, that's fine. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. I think if, we're having these open discussions to also help see if we have some consensus, so I too would like to weigh in on the director position, if in-house would be accountable to the CRA board as opposed to just the mayor. I think we're in agreement upon that now. And you mentioned we would have either, I guess, the CRA meeting or a commission meeting where we would discuss and weigh the pros and cons. While I think that we seem to be leaning towards bringing this in-house, I think it is important that we all acknowledge what any deficiencies or downfalls might be if we bring it in-house, just so that we know with our eyes wide open what we might not be able to do anymore, and what was the reason for contracting it out to begin with. And so whether that's now or before it comes up for a vote, I would just like to make sure we have that information as well.
Do you want a separate workshop on whether or not to bring it in-house? Or do you want to discuss that now?
Maybe, I don't know if somebody's prepared to speak about and can talk about why, because it's my understanding it was in-house to begin with.
The whole department was in-house prior
Okay.
to that time.
And then it became contracted, and so, I believe knowing the history is always very helpful in making decisions on where we're going. So I don't know if anybody's prepared to do that now. I don't need a whole PowerPoint, but just some information, or even just meeting with me separately. I don't know if how my fellow commissioners, if they want a workshop on that or not.
Commissioner Neary?
Thank you. Well, too, because this becomes uncharted territory, I think, for this city commission and this board, this CRA board, in that I don't believe there is a comparable position, at least since I've been on the dais and paying attention to city politics, so that the CRA board still has, I'm going to use this term because I can't think of another one, power to help set the map, if you will, for a position that doesn't answer to the city administration per se, but answers to the CRA board. So again, for us, at least, this is uncharted territory. So that really leads to my next question, which is, throughout the state in different CRAs, do we know if anything like this exists in terms of the ancillary staff, very important to the work getting done, being outsourced, but the director is not a part of that contract? Do we know if that exists anywhere, or can we maybe look into that?
I don't know the answer to that. We could certainly reach out.
Okay, thank you.
Do an inquiry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Nearing, that our internal auditor position is a position within the city that clearly operates independent of the mayor's office, and we would have the ability to direct this individual. But I do believe that it's necessary for us to look at the whole ball of wax at once, as opposed to piecemealing it, so that we know what we're getting into before we make a decision on that. I would agree with you on that.
So is there a consensus for having a separate workshop on this question alone, or?
Sounds like it.
Okay, all right. So, City Administrator, if you could schedule that, and we'll just have the workshop. And commissioners, if there's certain information that you want to have in advance to consider this item. I've heard a reference to the rationale for outsourcing it from years ago. I don't know if there's anything, any minutes, any memos, or something that speak to that question, if we could dig those out of the archives and get those to the commissioners. I think I heard another request is, are there any other CRAs in the state that have a similar makeup to what we're proposing? Let's see if we could find that information out. And commissioners, if there's anything else, yeah, Commissioner Shove.
Thank you, Mayor. If there's any way to try to more clearly define the reporting structure during that session of a potential move inside the city, to say who has the ability to contact, who has the ability to hire, fire, all of that information I think would be helpful.
Okay? Anything else on that item? So we'll get a workshop scheduled, and if you think of any items of information you may need prior to that time, feel free to contact the city administrator and get that information so we could make sure you have all the information you need to address this. Okay?